This is say and spell your full name.
Full name?
Yeah. What you go by?
Okay. Well, Rosa Maria Lopez de la Vega. So it's Rosa Maria Lopez. We'll leave out the de la Vega part. Yeah.
And what is your official title
In school,
in school?
I'm a teacher and campus minister.
Okay. Because of that there, let me get closer. Okay. Describe yourself as a child for me. Your early years.
Early years.
You're in Cuba?
I was born in Cuba right after the Bay of Pigs invasion. I was born into a family. I was the sixth of 9 children. About a month after I was born, my oldest brother and sister were sent as unaccompanied minors into to Miami through the Bay of, Peter Pan flights. Okay, and our family was not reunited until 5 years later when we reunited here in Miami, where we joined cousins, aunts, and uncles. We lived in a house of 22 of us, more or less, in a 3-bedroom house. And I had 3 more brothers and sisters born after that. So growing up was exciting.
It's pretty exciting
Yeah,
in the beginning,
yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah.
We haven't heard from anyone on camera describe the Peter Pan flights. What was that exactly?
The Peter Pan flights were organized there were a couple over in Cuba who were trying to, get the young children and parents who were afraid of what was going to happen with communism, because all priests and nuns, and there was greater oppression after the Bay of Pigs, were told to leave or being arrested, and children were being indoctrinated into the communist ideal, so it was a way to save their children. When my parents sent their 2 oldest, they thought it was only going to be for a few months. They never thought the Castro regime would last that long, and they said we'd be reunited. But those few months turned into 5 years, and they realized there was no hope. The children were sent unaccompanied with the hopes of reuniting again back in Cuba. They weren't. On this side, there was Monsignor Walsh, who would greet them at the planes, and he would find places for them to stay, homes and just different places. Boys Town housed a lot of the boys from there, and girls were placed in different families.
Were the Sisters of St. Joseph involved in that?
They were involved in that. They taught at the different schools that took in the children.
Can you say that in a complete sentence, the Sisters of St. Joseph?
Right.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and give a date to that too, kind of a time period.
Well, between 1960 and maybe 63, 62, when those flights were taking place, maybe not even that long. I remember I was just born when it was happening. The children would come to Miami. They would need to get placed in Catholic schools. Monsignor Walsh, who actually was taken that on as his cause, and he would place those children in Catholic schools throughout the area. The Sisters of St. Joseph taught at many of those schools, some of them being LaSalle High School, Immaculata LaSalle High School here, Saints Peter and Paul, St. Teresa's. So they ended up having very crowded classrooms with all these children coming in. And LaSalle opened because of LaSalle was a Christian Brothers school in Cuba, and when the Christian Brothers were being kicked out, they actually opened the same school here. And just like Belen is the same idea. Belen was a Jesuit school in Cuba. When the Jesuits had to leave the island, they actually opened Belen here in Miami.
Good.
That's where it came from.
Talk a little bit about early education.
Early education, knew no English, very scared. I do remember as a child, we lived like 6 houses down from Peter and Paul. And that's where we first met the Sisters of St. Joseph. A house of as many children as we had, my earliest memory of the Sisters of St. Joseph is that they would walk down the street afternoons, I guess, and they'd see us playing outside, and sometimes they would actually join us and play with us. Play volleyball, different things, and at that time they were still wearing the full habit, which I had never seen in my life before, so they were pretty scary back then to a person who's never seen them.
Exactly.
Yeah, so.
Exactly. So give me just a couple of thoughts about that, because I'm fascinated by the full habit. that's a mystique,
Right.
and I had friends who went to Catholic school, and I used to hear these horror stories.
Right.
You know, how much? Probably less than 2% of that was true.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
but so tell me, give me your impressions of that image.
Well, I only remember that 1 year, because after that, it was right after Vatican II, and so they no longer wear the full habit. I maybe met them with the full habit in kindergarten. So I don't have that much, they were scary. I mean, I was a child, 5 years old, had never seen anything like that before. I didn't know the language because they were speaking English and I only knew Spanish. But I do remember them playing. And so you had these long black things jumping around playing volleyball or something with us. And actually, I was a child on the footstep, where the rest of them, the older brothers and sisters, were playing. So,
Did the fact that they played with you dispel the fear a little bit?
not really. I mean, it was 5 years old. There's not that big of an encounter. You know, I saw them playing with my brothers and sisters and cousins. They probably never even, I don't even know, acknowledged that I was there. I was one of the toddlers or the 4 or 5 year olds playing in the background, kind of. So, yeah.
So what are your thoughts, since we're on this subject matter right
Yeah.
now? Because the Sisters of St. Joseph many, many years ago established that whole idea of not, well, I guess with the habit, with it changing over time.
Right,
They're more of the type to blend and to wear sort of the common
right.
clothes. What are your thoughts and impressions about that? I mean, it's very traditional. We were just looking at some
Yeah.
yearbooks,
Right,
and there's that, you know, along with the parochial
right.
teachings, it's very traditional looking. Over time, what are your thoughts about that dress changing?
You know, I understand the symbolism of, you know, having the triangle for the Trinity and just the long black and just a different symbolism of it. But when you go back to our founding, and that's why it brought about the change, we realized that when we were first founded, we were to wear the garb of the day. And the garb of the day for a woman to do the works of mercy out in the street, not in a cloister, was the widow's garb. And that's why the black. Okay? And then there's a beautiful letter that Jean-Pierre wrote a little bit after they were sort of established, but it was the Eucharistic letter. And one of his descriptions, which always stands out to me, that tells me that we would be a congregation but not a congregation. And like the Blessed Sacrament, we would be present and at times not seen. And so it's that kind of presence, to be one with the neighbor, one among the people, but not standing out or away from them. So there was that whole idea of total union of neighbor with neighbor and neighbor with God. So how I see the habit, first of all, I understand the prayers maybe that went and where I'm not sure where or how they started developing, how it became a habit, because even in the beginning, those who were women who entered, who were from a lower class, wore different clothing. Still black, but lower, because they were of a lower class. Class was very important in France at that time in Europe. And if they were upper class young women who entered, they would wear nicer black clothing. So when it became an official habit that we did this, I'm not sure where that history is. But it did, you know, and the Vatican asked us to go back to our founding. Why do we do the things we do? And when that was discovered in our documents of our founding, we were really to be one with the neighbor. And we were not to, you know, not the cloister, not apart, not away. So.
I understand. It makes sense, because I came across sketches of different full garb, and I
Right.
didn't know what the delineation was, whether it was over a period of time, but it all looked like from the same time period, so that
Yeah.
makes sense. It was different class.
A different class of woman. If you were an upper class, you had certain dress, and you wore like a widow of that class. And back then, all women wore veils. When you think that was,
Okay.
yeah.
That's true. Okay. Very early on, I see this reoccurring safe place. Became
Safe
sort of-
place, yeah.
Sort of an idea in your
Right.
head. When did that begin? And I guess as you talk about university, your time in university.
Yeah, well, I always, you know, at home, how can I say, having the English school was one place to be early in my early childhood, but it wasn't a safe place because you were in a strange place with language you didn't know. And so, every time we went home and then we were all together and we would talk in Spanish about everything that happened, it was a safe place to be. I found as I was in college and high school and college, I found that I spent a lot of time with my younger brothers and sisters. I'd like to, play with them. I would play touch football, and they were, remember, they're younger. That means they're about 7, 8, 9 years younger than me. 7 years younger than me, no. So that's quite an age difference. So here I am, a 17-year-old playing touch football with my 10-year-old brother or sister. So there was that sense that I noticed that that's what I like to do in my spare time. And that's where I got involved in high school. I loved the after-school sports, where it was not that idea of the structure of a classroom, but giving the kids a safe place to be themselves, to be welcomed in a group. And so that just kept growing in me. And that's why in college I said maybe I want to do education, not necessarily about the classroom, but about the atmosphere, the setting you want to set for kids.
Hold that thought.
Now, as far as the habit is concerned, I do believe in wearing outward symbols that identifies us in some way as, sisters or sisters of St. Joseph. I always explain to my kids that we wear the simple dress, not to stand out from the neighbor, but I always wear the solid color shirt inside another shirt so that the cross does stand out, because that is the symbol we have as an identity symbol. When I wear things to games and stuff, I like to wear the polo shirts that identifies us as Sisters of St. Joseph, but it still doesn't help stand us out. And I find many times those polo shirts that say our name, here they just see a cross, they don't know who I am. They know who I am. Unless they've met me in class, they don't know. And it ties in with the Blessed Sacrament, present, yet hidden. Hidden, yet present. Yeah.
Have you seen it? This battery's failing, so one quick question.
Yeah.
Do you see it in the way you choose to dress? Does it enable you to get things done easier?
Easier how?
Less intimidation, less misconception. I was thinking about, I think, Sister Barbara,
Yeah.
when she shows up to work on a project.
Right.
I'm just thinking, does it work for you, against you? Not
Well,
an issue.
It's really not an issue because I've never actually worn a habit to notice a difference between how I'm treated, whether or not. And we call it a habit.
But this is a habit.
Yeah,
Anything
this
a
is
habit,
it's a uniform, I guess. Yeah,
Okay.
so.
Okay, so talk about your decision in some of your degrees while at university and
Some of my degrees. My first degree was in math because I wanted nothing to do with English or writing, since English was still my second language and I had a very difficult time with that. But it was in college and I'd say I would say there's 3 stages to my vocation. First stage is actually knowing my aunt, who was my mom's twin sister and was a Carmelite sister. Okay, and she's the one that they're fun, they're noble, they wear a habit. She plays with us. She could talk to you about. We could talk to her about anything spiritual or to question anything, and she was never alarmed in that dialogue. So there was that experience where there was less of a fear. And then there was a sister of St. Joseph in St. Peter and Paul, Sister Mary Eleanor, who was very humble. But to me, she was the most real of the sisters, that she was really concerned with the families and those of Peter and Paul. In college is where I sensed God was at work and drawing me closer. And it wasn't an encounter with a sister. It was actually my oldest brothers and sisters had said they were going to be agnostic. I said, okay, it's my turn to say, I think I'll be agnostic, after going through 12 years of Catholic education. And I said, I think, okay, I'm 18 now, I'll stop going to Mass. I remember this clearly. And before that week came to an end, I was thinking at night, this is my analytical brain, and this is God's grace working through this. I go, well, if I'm going to say no to something, I really have to know what I'm going to say no to. And how do I get to know the person I'm going to say no to? And that's where I started reading scripture, joining scripture studies. And instead of saying no and rejecting, I started getting more involved in church, in prayer, in scripture. And to me, that was the first step, the real first step. Before it was, oh, they're cool, oh, they're nice. But now it's, okay, maybe God is saying something through this. And that's where I believe my first vocation, thinking, okay, let me look at this. And I knew I wanted to teach, to do kids. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about profession. It was how to best serve people with the gifts I had. And I felt that was to a call. But that's, so I started math because I knew that's what I could do. I wanted actually PE because really I liked the after-school stuff. But I needed to have a fail-safe in case PE didn't work out. Math, I could get any job in many different places. So it was very logical, very analytical. As I started teaching, I taught third grade. I've taught many classes, and then I felt, and when I entered with the sisters, and actually in going to Bible studies and with in the parish, Peter and Paul, involved in that type of sharing, is where I got more drawn into spiritual sharing, spiritual formation. And that's where I saw I could help people, like my aunt did, be able to question, to talk about their deepest experience of God or their faith, struggles, and not be alarmed, but be present in the same way Jesus or God would be with you. And that's where my call, my drawing towards campus ministry, spirituality. And so I did go, I got a master's in theology, feeling I need to be grounded well enough in that, not to lead anyone astray, not to lead myself astray, and trying to work towards spiritual direction, companionship as I continue to do the campus ministry and meeting people where they're at, present and yet hidden.
Got some broad shoulders there. So you've been teaching how many years now?
Oh, close to 30. If not 30, really close.
I'm just gonna remind you, you have to say it in a complete sentence, because we're not gonna hear him.
Okay.
You need to say,
Oh,
am
I have to
teaching.
say?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you can respond in a complete sentence.
Let's see, I started teaching before graduating from college because I did a lot of substitute teaching. So that was 1982, 1981, now it's 2016. So we're talking about 32 years. I'm taking a few years off for novitiate and 1 year studies and things like that, 32 years.
So talk a little bit about, and we'll just focus on math and religion,
Okay.
or theology. Mainly theology.
Yeah.
How has teaching it
Right.
over time, the time that you've been doing it, how has it changed for you?
It changes in that I have more faith in what God is doing within the child. It's not so much, or how God works with us. He works, I believe that God draws us, and our ultimate, to put it how I tell my students, it's God's helping us increase our capacity to love as we go through our life's journey, no matter what is thrown at us. And so it's not so much me trying to tell them they have to know this. I mean, there are facts and figures I have to let them be aware of, but it's more about their journey. And they're coming to know the loving God, loving and merciful God we have, and drawing them closer to that prayer experience. So I always give them opportunities for prayer, and I see in some of them that they're really not interested, but at least the opportunity is there, which is God. It's what God is like for us all the time. And we always have that choice. And so that's where I've been freer, saying all I can do is create the opportunities of encounters with God and spirituality for those that are before me. And God's always offering that to us. So that's where it's gotten easier for me. I'm not as worried about them learning all these facts and information. The math, I actually enjoy the math still, because I think many times I've taught some math and some theology, or done math and campus ministry. And so the kids see two different ways that are very competent. And so for me, it's also good for them to see that it can be a both and still serving the needy, those who need to pass math or move on, and yet how connected we are. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about, you belong to a very special order
Mm-hmm.
of sisters. Talk a little bit about the work, and you've already done that, but talk a little bit about the present day work and your hopes or what you see possibly for the future.
Yeah.
of the order.
Well, you know, when I look at the founding, which was really to take care of the neighbor where we're at, and whatever the need may be, I think that's still a very worthy calling. I think there's still a need. I think there's still people that may have the vocation to be a sister of St. Joseph. I see our sisters, our older sisters, as the pillars on which we stand, that they did that. And there's still a desire, but again, there's a connection prayerfully, but there's not the connection physically, you know, with us down here in Miami. And so the desire is the wish to connect more and to even invite more people to. And maybe our need to discern what is the real need, that we can continue that legacy. I've always had dreams of providing the need for those who really want to serve in the same charism that really may be, and providing them vehicles with which to do this. You know, as far as taking care of the homeless, taking care of the sick, taking care of the needy, taking care of the immigrant, it's always going to be there. And one of the visions that I have in this school is like a lot of the administrations, even though they're not Sisters of St. Joseph, it's still the same idea, is I see more taking care of the faculty so that the faculty can take care of the child. It's sort of like a chain reaction. And I think maybe that's where our legacy can continue. Can we provide people in our communities that want to serve in that way? A way to continue the legacy that way. Because unless others enter, the only thing we have is to sponsor somehow.
So you're talking about associates, right?
Associates or maybe young people. I've always dreamed, and again, I've said this, that dreamed of creating houses of volunteers. Getting young people who aren't quite ready to enter or don't want to enter but want to experience service, or many, the way society is now, a need is for these young adults to get housing while they do work that they may love. And if we give them the formation or the experience of the maxims and our prayers, maybe vocations will come out of that. And if they don't come out of that year of volunteer work is serving the dear need of the neighbor. So it's a way to reach beyond just, I'm one of the last few Sisters of St. Joseph left. It's creating places, safe places, for people who might want to venture into, and they don't have a vehicle with which to do it. They don't necessarily have to enter, but get the experience. I mean, I don't know if that helps, but that's where I'm at. Where do I see our future? If there is one, that's where I see it.
So that's that
Yeah.
in and of itself.
What burning anything inside of you would you like to share?
I don't know. I wish we could, it's more of a way to get our name out so people know about us rather than just,
Talk about it.
it
It's
just
my
seems
job.
like we reach a very limited audience in the things we choose to do, and I think I shared it with you last year, and it's just one thing that I said, to reach more ages, more age groups, is something like for this 150th to do the 5K run, to sponsor them throughout the state, and it just doesn't take.
They ditched that idea.
Yeah, they
I
ditch it
tried
all.
I tried to ditch it.
Yeah, and and I don't know if they ditch it because they think they got to run it.
Even when I said, you don't have to do anything, I'll do everything.
They keep telling me to do
Still
it, and I'm saying I'm teaching full time, and I got other things. But, and to me, just saying Sisters of St. Joseph, walk for the poor, education for the poor.
We had, just as
Yeah.
information to you, I pitched 12 events next
Yeah.
year. an event a month in a different location,
Yeah.
and they all got ditched,
Yeah.
so,
But those are things, to me, that would attract runners,
right.
families.
Is it,
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
sort of educating the sisters that you are a brand, like Coca-Cola, and other people want to be associated with your
Right.
brand, so,
Right, it's sort of like, to me, we came here 150 years ago to educate the newly freed slaves and blacks, right?
Mhm.
We don't have the people to do it unless we do it by proxy, somebody else. What if we let Florida know that these women have been here for this many years and want to sponsor a walkathon or a 5K run, whatever, and the funds wouldn't go to us. The funds would go to Catholic schools as tuition assistance for children and families that can't afford it.
I vote
We're
for
not
you.
making any profit. We're not making anything. The name gets out there, the people who do the 5K run, the advertising gets out there, the shirts you put on get out there. And there's organizations that organize this. You know, it's like, and I would say do it in the north, the south, and the central part of the state. Get the Catholic high schools that the sisters have been involved with. You want to, I mean, I'm not saying about vocations, I'm not saying about anything, but you want to get our name out. You want the state of Florida to know that 150 years ago, the Sisters of St. Joseph came to educate. We may not be in education, but we still want to help the legacy, the education of our children continue. Why not?
Yeah, we're getting a big old can of worms there, but.
Oh, it is a big can of worms, because I've said it, and all I get told is,
Yeah.
you do it.
yeah.
You have,
Okay.
you have hit every point that we were hopeful that
Yeah,
you would, and you've
right.
done it very